Hello, I'm Michael Jones, and
I'm Victoria Rotton.
welcome back to our podcast.
Still wearing the same clothes. Guess maybe we're doing two in one day.
Perhaps that is, or we just hate laundry.
That might be it too. Anyway, I suggested that we talk about something that I call urge surfing, because again, we're back to addiction. But before I really explain what that is, I wanted to talk about the severest addiction I actually had. I got off some that were maybe more life-threatening in the moment, but boy, I was extremely addicted to smoking. And I smoked at least a pack a day, and I spent a lot of time, a lot of energy trying to quit smoking and failing over and over again. And I was also, I've talked about this before, a Seattle firefighter at the time, so I was constantly going into people's homes and watching them, a lot of times it would be like COPD, which is a breathing issue, or congestive heart failure, or that kind of thing, and they're walking around with their little green oxygen, that was like their little pet, right? Everywhere they went, their little oxygen tank. And I thought to myself, I can see where this is going when I looked at that smoking. So I was really, really motivated that I wanted to get off smoking. But I just was having an impossible time doing it. And it was interesting. I was a binge smoker for a while. I had recovered from an eating disorder. But what I would do is I would stop smoking for like 2 or 3 days, and then I would pick up those cigarettes and just like binge smoke until I got back to the place I would have been if I had not stopped for those 2 or 3 days. So yeah, that was a really tough one for me to tackle. And when I did finally decide, I am hell no, not going to smoke past the age of 30, I just took it on. And what I remember, the thing that started to really help me is, again, that thing that I called urge surfing. But when I finally did quit and I started to notice what the feeling was that was coming up for me every time I wanted a cigarette, I came to realize that it felt like, I know this is going to sound weird, but like a crying baby that was desperate for comfort and probably also to nurse. And that it was the most intense type of loneliness and urgency, and I didn't know how to handle that kind of pain. I hadn't been till that point aware of what it was that was really driving the behavior. And then when I reflected on my infancy, I realized, both my parents told me that I had a really severe colic. They actually said it was pyloric stenosis, which is when I tried to feed, immediately I would get a terrible stomach ache, and then I would do projectile vomiting. So instead of like having this wonderful bonding experience with my mother, I would nurse, I would get sick, I would throw up, and this happened repeatedly. I mean, speaking of a way to get an eating disorder. And, they were always changing formula, whatever, it didn't seem to matter. I was always sick and I always felt terrible. And my mother said I looked like a malnourished child from a, starving country where there just wasn't enough food, and definitely not a white middle-class American girl. So I realized, actually, I was having feelings from the time of my life from 0 to, maybe 1.5. And I know this sounds crazy, like how would you know that? And the thing is, there's 2 types of memory. We have the memories in our head, which start at about 3, and you know what I'm talking about. It's like you can see a movie of certain scenes in your life and go, oh yeah, that time I went fishing with my dad and we caught the really large trout and it was so exciting, and then I went swimming, blah, blah. No, this type of memory is just in your body. Like, of course, I couldn't visualize an infant nursing, right? Like, I was that infant and I didn't have the developmental ability to, see or memorize scenes from that early in my life. So it's called explicit memory when you see the video, and implicit memory when you just have it stored in your body. And I had this screaming baby in my body that I had never been able to meet or understand. Because it made no sense to me. No one had explained to me that you could have memories from infancy. As far as most people were concerned, once you were done being a baby, you were done being a baby, and that was over, right? But that was definitely not the case for me. And I had to kind of develop a way of coping with that on my own. Maybe there's research out there about this now, but back when I was trying to figure this out, I did not see any information about how those early childhood experiences where you're supposed to feel safe and love and you can trust and all those things, I did not get that stuff. And I did not bond in a healthy way with my caregivers. And it was really interesting. Not too long ago, I had a young woman in my practice, and she just virulently did not like her mother. And I was just confused by this. I mean, I would talk to her about it, and she would tell me that, you know, I mean, there was nothing really that made me go, yeah, I can totally see why this happened. And so finally, I thought to myself, I wonder, and I questioned her about her infancy, and sure enough, really, really bad colic, did not bond with her mother. Her mother actually wore earphones on her ears for like a year, is what she told me, because she never stopped crying. And so that really, instead of having warm, loving connection with her mother, instead she had this memory of being hurt, of not getting her needs met, and just pain. And I remember having her mother come in. We had some family therapy sessions, and I was really, again, struck by how much her mother loved her and her father, and her inability to feel a connection with either of those people. And in fact, at 13, she found a boyfriend and bonded with him. It was like for 2 or 3 years they were inseparable. Like it was her family, right? He was her family. And she dropped trying to have a connection with her family, and it was only this young man. And then at some point, you know, as 13-year-olds do, as they get older, this young man decided, no, I want to date other people. And she immediately became suicidal. And it was actually terrifying. She was so suicidal that, you know, I had the mother literally sleeping in her room, took every kind of self-harm type of object that you could get out of the house. I was constantly on the phone with the psychiatrist, like just trying to get her through. It took about 2-3 months of, you know, really crisis kind of intervention to get her through that period. And it was so obvious to me. It's like her bond was with this young man at 13, and she would not go to or trust the people that actually really did love her. I mean, her mom just totally put her life up on the shelf and to take care of her. So this, I think, is a real thing. I think a lot of people actually, whenever I see someone smoking, I'm always going, I wonder what happened in your infancy, right? I mean, it's as close as we get to nursing as far as addictions go. And I know for me, that's where that came from. So when I started to, you know, I made that decision, I am stopping this, I then could just feel how desperate that baby was. And I'm like, I don't know what to do with this stupid baby. Like, you know, this is really hard. And I finally just decided, I don't think there's much choice here. I need to feel this pain. And I would actually imagine like holding a baby and nursing a baby and, you know, have music going. Like I was really trying to provide comfort to this young one inside of me. But, that didn't always work. What I found, though, was if I could feel the intense pain for 5-10 minutes, it usually shifted. Mm-hmm. And I might have another 10-15 minutes where I didn't think about it at all, or even up to an hour. And that started to turn a light bulb in my mind on, where I realized, oh, I am not feeling this constant desire to smoke. It comes and then it goes. And if I don't just immediately light that cigarette, mm-hmm. if I wait 5 minutes, there's a good chance, I'm having a conversation with the neighbor and I'm having a good time, and I'm not going to think about it again for an hour or more. And so, I know it sounds weird, but that was my practice of mindfulness, is realizing I have to be able to meet this intense pain, and then I have to let it pass. And, as time accumulated, I realized, I was getting a little more space and a little more space and a little more space, mm-hmm. in the sort of desperation I was having to shut that baby up. I guess that's the best word I could think of, is I just wanted to shut her up, and without ever trying to understand what she went through. Mm-hmm. And eventually I did manage to finally leave smoking behind. It was one of the hardest things I've done. I don't know why. It was harder than any other addiction I had, but that one was really tough. And a lot of times when people tell me something like, oh, I have an addictive personality, I always think, I bet you did not get your needs met as a baby. Mm-hmm. That's it. I really think that addictive personality thing comes from those early experiences as infants, where we don't get it's supposed to be just this warm, comfortable time where you're totally getting your needs met, mm-hmm. and you feel loved. And if that is not happening, another example I can think of is one of my women clients that was just left in her crib for hours and hours and hours. And again, I think she told me that she drank too much, and she told me that her baby was an alcoholic. And I was like, yep, but you're letting that baby be an alcoholic, mm-hmm. right?
So just as a point of professional reference, is addiction a personality type?
Well, I think there's many, like everything, I think there's many things that go into a person ending up having an addiction. And there are definitely some genetics involved, although I think actually, as everything, it's both nature and nurture. Mm-hmm. But there are families where there's just alcoholic after alcoholic after alcoholic. And I definitely think that there's genetics. Also, there's a lot of evidence that shows, like, people that are heavy weed smokers and they may quit during the pregnancy, it definitely sets up the kid to be more likely having difficulty with mm-hmm. smoking marijuana. I wish I could cite the research right now, but I've certainly read it, and you think that you're not harming your kid because you totally stop whatever the substance is when you're pregnant, but they end up, much more likely to become addicted to marijuana than kids that didn't have parents or a mother that smoked.
What about those that try to make a justification for their addiction? My dad drank, my mom drank, my grandfather drank, so it's just in my genes. Much like an abusive family cycle, mm-hmm. can you break the cycle of addiction?
People do it all the time. It's freaking hard. And you may have multiple generations of alcohol use, and it's really hard when your whole family are heavy drinkers, because suddenly you're going to show up to a party and you're the only one not drinking. Mm-hmm. They're not going to support that. People don't like it when, they see someone taking a stance of alcohol is not good for me, and everyone else around them is drinking and knows probably they should not be drinking so much. They're not, a lot of times, sometimes, but a lot of times, not supportive of that one person that wants to leave that thing that their family does. That's how they get to what they do when they get together. They drink, they get drunk, they socialize, they laugh, and they're not going to be helping you get out of that. You know, I've certainly seen with couples, like if one person's a heavy drinker or one person is, you know, really overweight, they don't like it a lot of times when their partner then gets sober or decides to get healthy, because that shines the light on them and they have to decide, is this something I want to look at? And usually they don't. So a lot of undermining goes on,
Yeah,
which is
so,
sad.
You know, I have heard that if someone in the family decides they want to move on to a healthier lifestyle, if their partner is not on board, it's kind of the opening tones to contempt and dissension. And it's like, why do you have to go to the gym? Why do you have to go for a jog? Why are you having a salad? The rest of us are having pizza.
Right, it breaks up a lot of marriages. I will be honest. If one person decides to get healthy and the other person doesn't, or they're sabotaging the efforts of that person because they're uncomfortable, like, I mean, normally we're both 50 pounds overweight and suddenly you're out, you know, running 10Ks, there's going to be a lot of conflict there. I mean, not always. There's no always.
No.
But yeah, in a lot of cases, I think that's true. But like anything, which, you know, if you grow up with a lot of alcohol in your family, yeah, there might be some genetics, but there's probably a lack of connection, right? And we've been talking over and over and over again about addiction or connection. If you come home and mom and dad have both had a few martinis and they're laughing on the couch or passed out on the couch, where are you going to get that loving support as a child, right? I've had so many people tell me, yeah, my mom was a PTA president, but when I came home from school, from kindergarten, she'd be passed out on the couch. I don't know what it is about PTA presidents. I shouldn't be saying this, but I can't tell you how many times I've heard this story. You know, the pillar of the community, and then when they're home, they're wasted. So I've repeated this over and over, and I'm going to keep saying it. If you're not getting enough connection in your home, you're going to look for something to deal with that. And if alcohol is the thing that's available in your home, or weed, guess what? That's what you're going to pick up. So it looks like it's genetics, but really, I'd say it's what's available. I think I already shared the story of the guy that's like, there wasn't anything available in his home, so he could get porn. That's what he looked at. But you know, you're in an addictive family, it's everywhere. You know, I remember my neighbors, she was my best friend when I was a kid. Her dad was an alcoholic for sure, and there was always alcohol. Like, we'd go over there and make ourselves cocktails out of every type of alcohol possible. Just pour it all into the glasses, you know. And it wasn't that easy for me to access in my house. That's why I turned to food. So whatever is available, that's what you'll pick. So yeah, genetics, but alcoholic parents, that is absolutely traumatic. You know, we underestimate that. And it doesn't even have to be that type of severe alcoholism. It can be that person that has 2 to 3 drinks every evening, yet they're just not quite fully there. And, you know, the kid can't really pick that out because that's their normal. You know, that their normal is slightly not present people, but nobody's drunk, no one's, you know, passing out or staggering around or hitting the kids when they get wasted, but they're still not getting that connection. And so it's so hard to figure out why do I not feel like I can really share who I am in this world?
Well, I mean, you kind of know what you're getting when you get into a relationship. If you met someone and you were both, you know, drinking up, having a good time, you know, if that's your thing, great. But if you meet someone and you're sober and they're having drinks, you can't, you know, honestly expect them to give it up now that you're a couple.
Yeah, I mean, people pick out partners all the time with the idea that they're going to change them. You know, what can I say? Everybody knows don't do that, right? Take that person as they are. If they're a heavy drinker, or if they have an addiction, or they have issues with rage, you're not going to do anything about that unless they decide. And they may not decide for their whole life. That's the way they want to live, and that's the way it's going to be. So instead of looking for someone that you are familiar with, as we talked about last time, especially if you come from a dysfunctional home, look for someone that feels actually really unfamiliar, and you're probably going to have better luck.
Breaking out of the pattern.
But anyway, the topic being today, urge surfing. But I wanted to add a little bit more about this. I have found, and it was interesting when I was talking to Denise, we did that in another podcast. She's been in recovery for like 30, 40 years. And this has been true for me. I have, when I quit smoking, okay, you're supposed to just move on and like not struggle anymore. But that was for me definitely not the case. And what I did was I actually replaced the cigarettes with red licorice. And I had, almost a package of red licorice every day for, replacing cigarettes. And it worked quite well because it was, I didn't gain a ton of weight on it. I think it's mostly sugar. It's terrible for you. It is all sugar. But it, when I really wanted that cigarette, instead I would have a red vine. And, I probably had one of those small boxes of red vines every day. And after about a year, I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to let go of my red vine addiction. But it was a stepping stone, right? I went from really bad smoking, really, really destructive smoking, to a much less destructive habit. And then the next step down was I let go of that, and I no longer used sugar as a way of coping with the pain. And I will say, I still, when I'm really stressed out or I'm really tired, I can feel that baby. I can still feel her inside of me. And often just crying or kind of desperate feeling, and I just try to be with it, and I focus on it. I mostly feel it like in my lips, and I just try to be with it and be kind and be loving, and probably within 10 to 15 minutes, she's comforted, and I'm ready to go on with my day.
I recall you telling me about a dream you had and feeding the baby cigarettes and wine and everything else.
Yeah,
and
we
so,
talked about that in another episode,
Yeah.
but that's what I finally realized is like a lot of the pain that I carried was from that infancy time in my life. And there's actually more to that story for me. I don't know.
Well, I mean, we're not limited on how many times we can revisit topics, so we will revisit it again in another time. But I am happy to know and to report that she's feeding her babies all kind of green things. One of the trademark sounds in our kitchen is the sound of the Vitamix grinding up veggie smoothies.
Yep.
So that baby is not getting red vines or cigarettes at this point, but she is getting healthy smoothies with greens and beets and carrots and hemp hearts. Oh my gosh.
I know.
You imagine trying to give that to a baby now.
Yep. Actually, I have a really, really healthy diet, but it's like everything takes time. You go from the cigarettes to the red vines to the, I think there was a while there that it was just buttered toast for me. I loved that. But over the years, I realized, hey, I don't feel good when I eat too much sugar. I don't feel good when I eat bread, for example. I don't feel good when I drink red wine. And I'm, I might get sick to my stomach when I drink too much caffeine. And I just have been able to slowly chip away at those things that I was doing really, to help me steer away from my pain. And
I do think a lot of addictions are to try to numb the pain. and you and I have discussed this, so this wasn't an independent thought or a point of brilliance on my part.
Yeah.
But I do know that the things that I consumed when I was sad were bad for me. But I do think that we have, again, had a great sharing session. And we want to thank you all for logging in again to spend time with us and to hear our thoughts and to take this time for reflection in your own lives.
Yep.
So again, thank you for being a part of our journey, and thank you for letting us be a part of yours.
Yep. Thank you, everyone. And just think about what urge surfing might mean in your life, what that would look like, and being mindful of the feeling, like truly explore the feeling that is driving the addictive process and trying to understand where that pain is coming from. Thanks, everyone.
Till next time.